Yeah, isn't that an interesting title? I don't know if you see the background pieces in there, but it's chess pieces there. And so it begins. So if we could turn to Revelation chapter 6, we're not going to hit the whole chapter. Actually, Revelation chapter 6 has 6 of the seals. We're going to hit the first 4. Now, you guys have heard the songs from Metallica and the other one, the 4 horsemen, the horsemen of the apocalypse. That's what we're going to cover tonight. So it's actually going to be very interesting to see all this. But we come to the seals tonight. Not the Navy SEALs, not the seals and walruses, but the seals that are locking those scrolls in place. The wax seals that's sealing that title deed, okay? We left off in chapter 5 last week, if you remember, where John was having this revelation, and he's in the throne room of God, and he's there, and he sees God the Father, and then he sees the 4 living creatures, he sees the 24 elders, and then he looks as he's just taking all this in, and he sees that God is right-handed, and he sees in the right hand of God this scroll. And he understands what the scroll is, that it's the title deed of the earth, that whoever has the ability to open that, to take possession of it, is going to really redeem man. And what he found out is that no one in heaven, no one under heaven, no one under the earth was worthy to take the scroll. And he started to weep. And he's freaking out because he understands what that means, that Satan is going to be the god of this world for eternity, and that there's no hope for man. And then one of the elders, one of the leaders in the church up there in heaven, says, "John, don't weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, he's there. He's worthy. He's going to be able to open the seals." And so John takes a closer look at the throne room, and he sees from within the throne a lamb of those that had been slain, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And we kind of left off with all that was going on there, and this drama is unfolding. It's like a movie, and really we stopped at the end of chapter 5, but it's a really hard place to stop because you're like, to be continued. It's like the Lord of the Rings when, Gandalf or whatever his name is there fighting the dragon, and it's like, oh, this would be a good fight, and then it just ends. Like, this isn't good. You left me hanging. And that's kind of where we were last week. And so we saw when the elder said to John in Revelation 5:5, I just want to read this to you. I quoted it, but I want to read it. He says this, "But one of the elders said to me, Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals." And so John takes that little peek closer, and he sees Jesus there, who takes the scroll out of the right hand of the Father. Now Jesus is in possession of this scroll. And that's where we're going to pick it up as all of this starts to happen. And so our text is Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. I'm reading from the New King James Version of the Bible. Also, our internet isn't working very well today. So if you're watching online, I apologize. It's going to cut out. Just know that. It is lagging. If you want to not have a double lag, but just one lag, come to service because, I can lag on. But, but you won't get anything cut off as you will on mine today. So, Revelation 6, 1 through 8. Check this out, guys. This is pretty powerful. "Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he went out conquering and to conquer. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, 'Come and see.' Another horse, fiery red, went out. It was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, 'Come and see.' So I looked, and behold, a black horse. And he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine.' When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature saying, 'Come and see.' So I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. Wow. I know you're like, I don't know what all that stuff means. That's what I'm here for, to help, interpret what the Word says, to teach what the Word says from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, to bring this to life. And it's pretty dark. I'm going to say that. It's pretty dark. It's hard to get excited and be animated when you're dealing with something so somber and so real and so powerful and really dark, just really dark, okay? What we're seeing in these first 4 seals are just the precursors to the Great Tribulation. It's just the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of what's to come. And it's dark, okay? Now, obviously, the book of Revelation is a book that we're to take with great seriousness. It's very somber. It's a book of sobriety, if you would, And up to this point, in the book of Revelation, it hasn't been that bad. Like, we've looked at Jesus rebuking the 7 churches, or 5 of the 7. He had some harsh things to say to some of them, and that's bad, but it wasn't like dark. And then we're taken up to heaven, and we're seeing the heavenly throne room. Like, well, this is glorious. This is great. But it hasn't been like dark. And it's getting dark tonight. It's a little scary. Because now that we're out of chapter 5 and we're into chapter 6, we're no longer going to see what's going on in heaven. Let me rephrase that. The emphasis isn't going to be what's going on in heaven. The emphasis now is going to be what's going on from heaven and what's happening on earth. What's going to happen to the people on earth and to the earth itself from the throne of God. And it's powerful. So here in chapter 6, the focus changes, okay? We're no longer focusing on heaven, we're focusing on what happens on earth. Now, what we're looking at tonight is the beginning of the end. That's what we're looking at. Revelation chapter 6 all the way to chapter 19 is dealing with the tribulation period. Chapter 19 starts to turn into the second coming. Chapter 20 and 21 is the millennial reign, and chapter 22 is our future hope and glory. So we're going to be in a long section, 6 through 19, of these 7 seals of the judgment that's to come. And it's powerful, and again, it's dark, okay? We are at the beginning of what is called in the Old Testament the 70th week of Daniel, found in Daniel chapter 9. We are entering into that prophecy that is found in Daniel chapter 9, the 70th week, the 7-year period, as it's known as the Tribulation Period, okay? Altogether, on this scroll, there are 7 seals, 7 wax seals, and we're going to look at the first 4 seals tonight. Next week, we'll look at the 5th seal, and then maybe the 6th seal. I'm not sure how far we're going to get. The following week, we'll look at the 6th seal. When we get to the 7th seal, in that seal, there are 7 trumpet judgments and 7 bowl judgments. So there's a lot in that 7th seal that we'll look at, which we won't hit in 1 week. We're going to hit it in a couple weeks. Or actually in a couple of months, like multiple months, like maybe up to a year, I don't know. Because there's a lot that goes on, and we'll see how in-depth we get. But tonight we're looking at what we call the 4 horsemen. Okay? The horsemen of the apocalypse. This big old, here we are in the good stuff, And as the seals are broken, I want you to know that as Jesus receives this title deed of the earth, it's not like a typical title deed like we would see today, okay? It doesn't show the ownership of the land, which would be earth, the title deed of the earth, until all of the seals are opened. And once all of the seals are opened, and the things in the title deed have been fulfilled, then Jesus can take possession of the earth. So though he has possession of the title deed in Revelation chapter 6, he is taking possession of the earth, but he's not in possession of the earth at that point in time. He owns the title deed, but he hasn't. He's fulfilled everything in there, but he hasn't followed through with it. It's all going to be hashed out as he opens up these seals. So he's going to open up one seal that says these things have to happen to redeem the earth, which is going to be the first horseman. He's going to open the second seal, the second horseman. It's going to go on and on and on until he fulfills all the requirements that are met in that title deed. Okay. Now, I do want to say this, okay? We're looking at the future. This is important, okay? This has not taken place yet. It hasn't happened, but it's going to. This is going to happen, okay? And I believe that we as the church, those who are literally born again, not not the religious folks. You have a question?
I do.
What's your question?
Who has the unopened one?
Who has the unopened one?
Yeah, the unsealed one.
I'm going to say, in this sense, it's probably going to be in the possession of Satan.
Okay, so he knows what's in it.
Yeah, he knows. Well, he knows what has to happen to get it bought back, which is why he thought it would never be bought back. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
It's okay. We're in class, so class is good. But I believe wholeheartedly that the church isn't going to experience the Great Tribulation Period, or the Tribulation Period. I believe that God is going to rapture the church. We've gone through this. When we started chapter 4, we really broke that down of why and how and what the scriptures say on that. And if you're like, I don't know, go listen to our message on chapter 4, which is on our website, because we go into a lot of detail on that. But clearly, what I want to be clear, because a lot of people will take the book of Revelation and they'll spiritualize it, and they'll say, well, this here, these locusts are describing Apache helicopters, and this is a nuclear war, and they go into all that. But I want to be really clear that this is the wrath of God and not the wrath of man. So we're not going to get into this is nuclear war, and this is an Apache helicopter, and this is, because it's not. It's not the wrath of man. It is going to be the wrath of God. It's bigger than that. It's going to be greater than that. It's going to be harder than that. And it's going to be darker than that. Okay? Now, something that's really helpful when you're going through these seals is to read it with the parallel passage of the Olivet Discourse, which is in Matthew chapters 24 and chapter 25. In fact, we're going to break these down, so if you are taking notes, I'm going to give you a whole lot of scriptures. We're going to go seal 1 in Revelation, seal 1 in Matthew, seal 2 in Revelation, seal 2, and we're going to break it down and show you that Jesus is talking about this very thing, but Revelation goes into a lot more detail than Jesus does, but it's all there, okay? So if you're a student of God's Word, which I assume we are because we're here on a Wednesday night, I want to challenge you to study out these parallels, because you're going to get a lot more insight into what it is. And what he's talking about, you're going to know what these 7 seals are and what it entails, okay? Now, tonight, we're going to look at Matthew 24, because we're only going to hit the first 4 seals. We're not going to go into Matthew 25 tonight. We might a little bit, but we're really going to focus on Matthew 24, because that's the first 4 seals. But all of the seals are dealt with in Matthew 24 and 25, okay? Now, we know that the 7th seal holds most of the information that's found in the book of Revelation. In Revelation chapter 8, the 7th seal is broken. And in that 7th seal, like I've already said, there are 7 trumpets, judgments that are found in that 7th seal. And then there are 7 bowls of wrath in that 7th seal. In fact, it says in Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 and 2, it says, when Jesus opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets, okay? So these are the 7 trumpet judgments that are going to be found in that 7th seal. And in the 7th trumpet judgment, so there's the 7th seal, and then in that you have 7 trumpets, right? So then you go through trumpet 1, trumpet 2, trumpet 3, trumpet 4, 5, 6. When you get to the 7th trumpet, in that trumpet, there are 7 bowls of wrath. So it just kind of like opens up and opens up and opens. It's like that pyramid scheme, right? It just keeps opening and opening and opening. Okay? Now, in the 7th trumpet, there are 7 bowls of wrath. There are 7 bowls of judgment that are in that. So in that 7th seal, you have a lot going on. And it's a lot of chapters in one seal. Okay? And ultimately, all of these seals are the judgment of God on mankind. All of it, okay? Most of the judgments that we're going to see are in that 7th seal. What we're going to look at tonight is just the precursor. It's just the precursor of what's to come. Now, all of the stuff that we're going to talk about is found in that parallel passage that Jesus spoke about 35 years earlier. Because in the book of Matthew, that was written 35 years before the book of Revelation. Okay, and I want to read this to you because I want us to see this. Matthew 24, verses 4 through 8 says this. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to break it down, and we'll do the parallel so that you can get which verses in Revelation and Matthew. But Matthew 24, 4 through 8 says this. And Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Hear his words. The beginning of sorrows. Matthew 24, verses 9 through 31 is another section where we call it the Great Tribulation. Matthew 24, 4 through 8 is the first four seals, the tribulation. Matthew 24, 9 through 31 is the Great Tribulation. There's a difference between the tribulation and the Great Tribulation. Do you guys know what that difference is?
Yeah, one's minor and one's major.
So all of it is in that 7 years. The tribulation period is the first 3.5 years. The Great Tribulation is the second 3.5 years. Okay? The first 3.5 years is the beginning of sorrows. It's just a taste of what's to come. Now, so we're going to break up the tribulation period into two periods. The first 3.5 and the second. And the reason why we're going to do that is because the book of Revelation does that multiple times. The book of Daniel will do that. The different prophecies will break it up. Jesus breaks it up. He'll talk about the tribulation and then he'll talk about the Great Tribulation. And so he breaks it up, and so we're going to do that same thing. Jesus makes reference to the Great Tribulation in Matthew 24, verse 21, where he says this. He says, for then there will be great tribulation. This is the second 3.5 years of that 7 period. Such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. It's dark, church. The Great Tribulation is what Jesus is dealing with in Matthew 24, verses 9 through 31. Okay? Before the Great Tribulation, before the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period, there's what we call the beginning of the tribulation period, which is just the tribulation period. Now, in that first 3.5 years, there's going to be a sense of peace that's going to happen, and then the judgments will begin to happen, okay? They're called the beginning of sorrows. That's what Jesus said. The first 3.5 years is nothing in comparison to the second 3.5 years. And I'm emphasizing this because we're looking at the first 3.5 years tonight. And I want you to know that all that we look at tonight is nothing compared to what's to come after that. And what's coming tonight is pretty dark. Okay? The first 3.5 years of the tribulation period are found in the first 4 seals, which are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay? Now, what we're studying tonight in Revelation 6 are those first 4 seals. That's what we're going to look at. This is the beginning, okay? Listen to me, this is important. This is the beginning of sorrows. It's the beginning. It's nothing like what's going to come after this, okay? And what I just read to you out of the book of Revelation didn't seem like the beginning of sorrows. Think about it. In Revelation 6:8, which is what we closed with in that section there are almost 2 billion people killed. 2 billion. And this is just the beginning of sorrows. Because 1/4 of the earth will be devastated. Okay? Interesting. Here it is. Let's break this down. Matthew 24, verse 5 is the first seal. And if you're taking notes, watch this. Matthew 24, 5 and Revelation 6, 1 and 2 are the same thing. Let me read these to you. Matthew 24, 5 says, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. The parallel is Revelation 6, verses 1 and 2. I'm going to break down these different seals, and then we'll go back and explain it, okay? So the parallel to Matthew 24, 5 is Revelation 6, 1 and 2, where it says, now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and conquering. Like, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. It will. I don't see the parallels. You will. Matthew 24, 6 through 7a, the first part of verse 7, is the second seal. Okay? And the second seal is found in Revelation 6, 3, and 4. Let me read these parallels. Watch this. So the Matthew, this is the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, 6 through 7a says this. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all of these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. This is the second seal. Watch this, Revelation 6, 3, and 4. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, come and see. Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there was given to him a sword. So the Olivet Discourse and this they parallel each other. Now, Matthew 24, verse 7b, and Revelation 6, 5 through 8 are the third and fourth seal. Okay? Matthew 24, 7b, and Revelation 6, 5 through 8 is the third and fourth seal. Watch this. It's Matthew 24, 7b through 8, not just 7b, 7b through 8. And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Now here's the parallel. Revelation 6, 5 through 8. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come and see. So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, come and see. So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given him over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. Now I point all of this stuff out, so as we go through this, you'll see the parallels, because I'm going to teach this, hopefully, pretty thoroughly tonight, okay? Now, let's jump to Revelation chapter 6, now that we've gone through the parallels, and now let's get into the passage, okay? Hopefully you'll see it. It says in Revelation 6:1, now I saw, and that was my intro. Now I saw when the Lamb had opened one of the seals. Now the first thing I want to point out here is who is opening the seals?
Jesus.
It's Jesus. It's the lambs. Where's this stuff coming from? Jesus. The Lamb. The throne room. Heaven. It's not coming from man. It's coming from God, okay? And I want you to note that because every time Jesus opens a seal, God will then begin to pour out judgment. And I want you to know where it's coming from, okay? It's going to be judgment that's going to be poured on the world, okay? Don't forget, this is the beginning of sorrow. This is the beginning of sorrow, okay? This is just the precursor to the Great Tribulation that's coming. This is the easy part of what's to come. And I want you to understand this as we get into, okay? Church, the beautiful thing about what I'm going to teach on tonight is that I won't be here for this. Okay? And if you're a born-again Christian, you will not be there. You will be up in heaven when all of this stuff happens, okay? And for me, it's really important that we have a heart that is set on pilgrimage because we are pilgrims passing through this land. This is not our home. This is not our world. Yes, we were born in the world, but we're not of the world. Once we became born again, we became born in a new kingdom, a different kingdom. Okay? When I read the book of Revelation, especially what we're going to be getting into tonight and in the future, it really stirs me up. It really gets me passionate because I'm a pilgrim and this life is not the end of it for me. And all the stuff that's going on in this life and all the trials that I go through in this life is nothing. It's like you can't even compare it to the glory that we're going to see in that day when we're there. The book of Revelation sobers me up. Think of all the trials that you're going through. I've talked to a lot of you guys this week, a lot of you guys today, and the trials that you're going through, right? And they're legit. You're going through real stuff, And I think of all the problems that you've gone through in your life, and all the trauma that you guys have had in your life, all the struggles that you have. Know this. One day it's all going to end. It's all going to end. And I think we should be looking like Paul when he told Titus in Titus chapter 2, verse 13. He says, he's looking for the blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I just want to point out that, because we're going to get to some dark stuff, that it's a blessed hope. It's a blessed hope. And I think that sometimes when you realize what's to come and the hope that we have to kind of bypass that, when you're going through your trials, I think it helps to know that, wow, what's to come is pretty dark. My trial's not, I'm going to say it sucks, but man, it could be so much worse. And the hope that I have in the midst of my trial, as much as I'm suffering or going through some stuff, is nothing compared to what's coming later that I won't experience if I'm a Christian. The trials that you have are not forever. And I have a couple of questions that I was asking myself this week that I want to ask you guys. Because like when you guys go through trials, it affects me too. Because I care about you guys. You guys are my family. I'm your shepherd in a sense, and so it bothers me. But here's a question, because these are questions that I was asking myself. Are you sick of your body? Are you tired of your flesh? Are you exhausted with fighting sin? These are questions I've asked myself. Are you tired of Satan coming in and tempting you? I am. Are you tired of falling for his deceptive tricks and, waking up like, man, I did it again? You tired of that? You tired of feeling like an idiot because you fell for his snare again and again and again, knowing that you don't have to? Are you tired of giving in? Do you know what? At the rapture of the church, you're going to get a glorified body. And I just want to speak this boldly. You're going to have the perfect voice. You're going to have the perfect body. You're going to not have dysphoria. You're not going to have, weight issues. You're not going to have, man, I wish I was younger issues. I could do so much more back then. You're not going to have any of that. It's going to be glorious. Listen to what the psalmist says in Psalm chapter 84, verse 5. He says this, because we're Pilgrim's Church. He said, blessed is the man, the woman, the person, whose strength is in you, God, whose heart is set on pilgrimage. And I want you to think about this, that we are pilgrims as we read through and study through the book of Revelation, okay? Notice the word set here. You know what that reminds me of? Another scripture. Now, before we get to that scripture, let me ask you this question. Is your heart set on this world not being your home? Because my heart is set on this world not being my home. This world, the longer I live in it, the darker it gets, and the more I'm like, there's not much that's keeping me here as far as desire goes. There's not really, Lord, there's nothing in my future that I want to wait for and do apart from you. Lord, just come for me, God. I'll stay as long as you have me, but just come for me. If your heart is set on pilgrimage, church, in this world, then this world will not be your everything. Your body will not be your everything. You will live in light of the kingdom of God. Do you remember Revelation 4:2? Because this one says, whose heart is set on pilgrimage. Revelation 4:2 says there's a throne set in heaven. Okay? Remember what Jesus said? His will be done, his kingdom come. His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. His throne is set in heaven. His kingdom is coming. Think about this. God is going to take you to heaven one day. Visualize this in your mind, okay? It could be sooner than you think. It could be later than you think. The scriptures tell us all over that we are called and we are commanded to be ready. We should be ready for that glorious day. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11, Peter says this, "Beloved, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims, I'm begging you, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul." Peter begs them. And when we think of fleshly lust, we think of sexual morality, but that's not what that's talking about. That's included in there. Fleshly lust is anything that your body desires that's not godly. Peter says, I beg you, church, I am pleading with you to abstain from fleshly lust because you are a sojourner and you are a pilgrim passing through. Your time on this earth is short. Okay? A pilgrim is someone who's passing through. We are sojourners. This world is not our home. I don't know if you guys know the story of Abraham in the Old Testament, but Abraham declared that he was seeking a home that was not of this world, a place not made with hands, a place where God had prepared it by faith. And by faith, Abraham was looking for the promised land. Do you know that Abraham never built a house in the physical promised land when he was here? Did you know that? God told him to go to the promised land, to the land of Canaan over there. He goes, and he never built a house there. He lived in tents. Do you know why? Because he was a pilgrim. He was waiting for his home from God. It says in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 through 10, this is what it says. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise, the land that God promised him, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He was a pilgrim. That's who Abraham was. And church, we've got to have that in the forefront of our minds as we go through and we study these dark things that are going to happen. We've got to have our hearts and minds set on pilgrimage. Okay? If you have your heart and mind set on pilgrimage, it will change your life. It will bring joy where there's sorrow and frustration. When you lose your voice or your insurance bothers you or your car breaks down or whatever it is that you're going through, if your heart is set on pilgrimage, though those trials aren't fun, they're not going to be as dark as they could be. Because this is not your home. Okay? This life isn't it. There's coming a day when we are going to let go of these bodies that we're in, and we're going to transcend into heaven, literally, and we're going to receive a new, glorified, perfect, sinless body. And I believe that it's during the tribulation period that the church will be in their glorified bodies experiencing the marriage supper of the Lamb. Okay? We're going to be celebrating with our groom, Jesus Christ, as he celebrates with us on that day. Now, the reason I say that is you've got to understand Jewish weddings of that time. A Jewish wedding in John's time was so much different than the weddings in our time. The weddings, I'm planning the wedding, right? So the wedding we have is usually about 4 or 5 hours. You know, we plan the wedding, we plan the reception immediately following, and then immediately after that we plan on everybody going home and not seeing them because we're going off on our vacation, our honeymoon, right? And that's how it is today. But in Bible times, a wedding was 7 days. It wasn't 7 hours, it was 7 days, okay? And obviously that parallels the 7 years of the tribulation where we're going to be up with the bride, as the bride, we're going to be up there with Jesus at the marriage supper of the Lamb. You know, we come back with him at the end of the tribulation period, not as the bride of Christ, but as the wife of Christ. Now, 7 days of celebration, 7 days of declaring and consecrating the marriage was the Jewish time. That's what the marriage supper of the Lamb is going to be. It's going to be 7 years of just consecrating the marriage, of really declaring and getting to know our Lord in our glorified bodies. You know, in the Jewish weddings, there were clothes that were given out. You would come to the wedding with they would give out these white garments, which is parallel to what's going to happen in Revelation now. We're going to get white garments that's going to cover our new bodies. That promise will be given to the church and to the tribulation saints that will all get our new bodies. So Jesus opens up this first seal. Let me get back to it because I went on a tangent. Revelation 6:1. Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." So the first living creature says with a voice like thunder. I want you to visualize this for a minute. And this is why it's hard to teach, because we can't visualize a voice like thunder. But I want you to think about the loudness of thunder. Like those who have been back in the Bible Belt, when there's a thunderstorm, I mean, it is loud. It rattles. It's power. It stops you in your tracks. Even here, we have it in Oregon occasionally, where you'll hear loud thunder when it's really close, and it's just like you are in awe of the power of that thunder. So this angel, or this living creature, this first living creature, is going to shout or speak with a voice like thunder. Okay? Powerful. You know, thunder is scary to a lot of people. I remember my children, anytime there was thunder, before the age of, I would say, 8 or 9, it didn't matter if it was far or close. I knew I wasn't going to sleep that night because they were going to all be in my bed. Because they were terrified of the thunder. They're scared of it. The dogs, terrified of thunder. You know? And so it's scary to a lot of people. Now, put yourself in John's shoes. He's there. He's in heaven. He sees the throne room. He sees God. He sees Jesus take the scroll. One of the first seals is broken open. And then with like the sound of thunder, just come and see. And he's just like, whoa. He's just in that spot. Imagine that. Come and see. Wherever John was looking, when he heard that thunder, his head went and he looked. Okay? Come and see. This thundering voice of this living creature says. And I'm absolutely positive it got John's attention. Now, interesting. Revelation chapter 6, verse 1 and 2, where it says, "Come and see, and I looked and behold." Okay? It would seem like in our English that the living creature is talking to John. Okay? But that's not what the Greek is declaring. The living creature is not talking to John. John is just observing the conversation that's happening in heaven. Okay? Most scholars agree that the living creature is calling the horsemen to come. So when the living creature says, "Come and see," he's calling that first horseman that the seal is going to call out. It's the judgment, okay? Now remember, we're looking into the future, church, okay? This is what's going to happen in the tribulation period. The scroll is going to be cracked open. With the breaking of the first seal, the creature's going to come forth, and with a voice like thunder, is going to say, "Come and see," and he's going to summon judgment. He's going to summon the first horse of the four horsemen. Now let's look at this horseman and find out what this is. Revelation 6:2. "And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering to conquer." And if I know you guys, you're probably saying to me, "Okay, Amy, this is where I get lost in the book of Revelation. This isn't making a lot of sense to me. It's so mystical. I don't know what's the horseman, what's this bow, this crown. Like, what does this mean? I don't understand." Okay, who's this person on the horse? What's this bow and this crown that's giving him out to conquer? And what is all this? Well, I really believe that the Olivet Discourses will help us interpret what's being said here. Now, first of all, the word white most likely refers to peace. Think about it. If you're French, or you're in what do you do when the armies come? You raise up the white flag, right? Not just French. It's a side of, I want peace. I want to surrender. It's peace. You know, that's what it symbolizes, and that's what it looks like, okay? Most scholars believe that's what it's referring to, and in John's day, that's what it referred to. Surrender. Interesting, the word crown here speaks of victory. Okay? Now, it's the victorious crown. It's not the diadem crown, the Greek word diadem, which is a king's crown. It's not a king's crown. It's a crown of victory. The word is faunus. It looks like phoenix, but it's faunus. It's the crown of victory. That's what the word is. And clearly, we already see that this horseman has a bow, okay? A bow speaks to some degree of power. But notice that though this horseman has a bow, he has no arrows. That's important, because the second horseman will have a sword. But this horseman has a bow, which speaks of power, but no arrows. Okay? Really, really important. It doesn't say he goes out with his bow and arrows. He goes out with a bow. He goes out with a bow, conquering and to conquer. He goes out to overtake. He goes out to conquer. Many believe that this is referring to the immediate time right after the rapture. That after the rapture, the horseman comes and he's going to conquer, but he's not going to have a weapon per se. He's going to conquer some other way. Now, many believe that this is referring to the Antichrist. I'm in that camp. Okay? Or the system of the Antichrist, if you would. That there's going to be a worldwide peace immediately after the rapture. And the first horseman, which would symbolize the Antichrist here, he comes and he tries to mirror a king. He's got a crown. Okay? He looks like the Messiah. He has a bow with no arrows. Most scholars believe that the first horseman will go out to conquer, but he won't conquer with war or with military might. He's going to conquer from more of a political angle. That's why he has no arrows. Okay? Conquering through mediation, through discourse, through talking and speaking. So the horseman's going out and he's going to take some political ground. And there's a peace that's going to come. Now, it's very interesting because according to the Olivet Discourses, the first seal in Matthew 24, verse 5 says this. Now, I want you to think about it. This first horseman is on a white horse. He has a bow. He has a crown. Now, who today has a crown? The church. It's going to look like the church. Watch this. The first seal, Matthew 24:5, says, "For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many." And we believe that this is parallel to the first seal, to the first horseman, okay? To a false Messiah. There's a deception that's going to happen. And we know that the Antichrist, according to the 70 weeks of Daniel found in Daniel chapter 9, we know that the Antichrist is going to rise up and seemingly make peace with Israel, which would explain this first horseman. And in the middle of that week, the week being 7 years, in the middle of that peace treaty of 7 years, the 3.5 years into it, he's going to break that promise and break that treaty, if you would, okay? And that happens in what Daniel calls and what Jesus calls the Abomination of Desolation, okay? And we'll most likely look at that next week. I don't think we'll get into it this week, which the Abomination of Desolation will begin the second half, which will begin the second half of the tribulation, which is called the Great Tribulation. Are you guys following me? Are we on this so far? Yeah. Okay, I want to make sure that we're getting this, okay? The Great Tribulation is found in seal number 6 and number 7, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, that's the Great Tribulation, 5, 6, and 7. Those 3 seals are primarily the tribulation period, and mainly seal 7 is the bulk of the Great Tribulation, okay? All the way up to chapter 19. Now, the other 3 seals, 5, 6, and 7, are the Great Tribulation. Now, seal 6 and 7 is when the Abomination of Desolation takes place. Now, what that is when the Antichrist comes into Israel and walks into the temple and sits down and declares himself as God. That's what the Abomination of Desolation is, which Jesus talks about in Matthew 24, verse 29. He says this. He says, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened." This is seal 6 and seal 7. This is Matthew 24, 29 is seal 6 and seal 7. "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken." This parallels Revelation 6, verses 12 and 13. It says this, I looked when he opened the 6th seal, And behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, as the fig tree drops in its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. And he goes on to say in Matthew 24, verses 30 and 31, because I want us to see the parallels here, says this, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So in the fifth seal, we see the parallel of all of the discourses. It talks about the nation of Israel running. It talks about how Israel's going to have to flee. Like literally, the people in the land of Israel are going to have to flee. It says, it tells Israel, pray that your flight isn't in winter or on the Sabbath, because it's going to be so quick. When the Abomination of Desolation happens, the persecution is going to be so quick that you pray that don't even go down to your house. Just look, just run. Run to the hills, because you're going to be slaughtered. Okay? They're fleeing Jerusalem. They're fleeing because the Antichrist has risen up. He's brought peace, which represents the rider on the white horse, the Antichrist. He brought peace which no one else was able to bring, okay? Listen, every single one of our American presidents have tried to bring peace to the Middle East. And every single one of them have failed. It hasn't been done, okay? And you've got to understand the times that we live in, okay? When you study eschatology, the times that we live in are amazing, okay? Because we live in a day when Israel is actually a nation. Realize this, that for over 2,000 years, Israel was not a nation. And they became a nation on May 14th, 1948. For 2,000 years, there was no nation Israel, and now we live in a time where there's a nation Israel. This is incredible. You know, Latin, we call it the dead language, right? Because the people of that time, that culture, they don't exist anymore. And so we take some of the Latin words like the word fetus, or we take different words that are Latin, we make it English. But what happens when a country has been conquered, and especially for 2,000 years, they get integrated into the culture that conquers them. There's been no culture in all of history, except for the nation Israel, where the nation was taken into captivity, dispersed, and they kept their bloodline, they kept their language, they kept their culture, and they came back 2,000 years later, still with all of that intact. This is an absolute miracle, okay? Now, in Israel, there is a great need for peace. There's more conflict in the Middle East today than there's ever been. All you have to do is get outside of the news of American channels, go to like the Jerusalem Post, or go to the news from different, like the BBC, or different news channels outside of America, and you can see how much Israel is a problem in the Middle East today, okay? When we talk about peace in the Middle East, we're not talking about the Jews and the Palestinians. It's not about the West Bank. It's not about Gaza. It is literally about one little piece of land called the Temple Mount. That is what all of the fighting is about. This little piece of land where the Jews believe that David set up his altar. It's where Isaac was about to be sacrificed by Isaac, or by Abraham in this little place, and it's where the Muslims believe that Muhammad ascended into heaven, all in the same spot called the Temple Mount, okay? According to Islam, it was Muhammad there. Now, it's a holy place for the Muslims, it's a holy place for the Jews, okay? They have a shrine there, it's in Israel, but the Muslims control it. And if you look at a picture of Israel, you're going to see a building, like an octagon almost, with a gold dome on it. This is the problem. That little piece of land right there, that little sliver right there, is what all the fighting is about. They have a mosque there right now. The Muslims control it in Israel, okay? So the conflict we see isn't about the West Bank, it's not about Gaza. Those are all side issues. It's a spiritual issue. It's a religious issue. It's about the real estate of the Temple Mount. That's what the problem is in Gaza or in that section of the world today. Now, does it belong to the Jews or does it belong to the Muslims? That's the problem. That's the fighting. That's what it's all about. And if you were to whip out a map, don't worry because I will, and you were to color code all the religions, actually, let's just pull this up. You'd be taken back about all of it, okay? So let me get my little thing here, okay? So this is India, so they're Hindu. All the green is Muslim. The purple is kind of Christian. And that little blue right there, that little sliver that looks like a little hook there, is Judaism. They are surrounded by Islam. Completely inundated by Islam. Okay? Israel looks like a little hook, right? It looks like a little sliver. That's why the Muslims say that the Jews are a sliver in their side. They literally say that because Israel literally is a sliver in their side. Literally. So you've got to understand the geography of Israel here, okay? Israel is a land bridge of the Middle East. It's a land bridge. If you're in Russia and you want to go to Africa by land, you have to go to Israel. If you're in any part of Africa and you want to go to Europe by land, you have to go through Israel. It is a land bridge, okay? Now, it's a strategic piece of property in the Middle East. If you were to go to Israel right now, and you were to ask an Orthodox Jew today, you walk up to them and you say, how do you know who the Messiah is? Because they don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. We believe Jesus is the Messiah. They believe the Messiah is still coming. They're looking for the Messiah. So if you were to ask them today, and you could go and ask them, how do you know who the Messiah is? Because they're still waiting for the Messiah. How would you identify the Messiah when he appears? The Jews would say, the Messiah will bring peace. That's what they will say. He will bring peace. Church, I want you to know that the scene is set. Israel is looking for peace. And the sad thing is, what they're going to get is not the Messiah, but the first horseman, which is the Antichrist, a false Messiah. A political leader of some sort is going to come on the scene. And when he comes, he's going to deceive Israel. And they're going to receive him as their Messiah. What I'm talking to you right now is going to happen. This is going to happen, okay? I'm standing here knowing that the Bible, the Word of God, is mostly, all the prophecies in there are mostly all fulfilled. There are just a couple more that need to be fulfilled. They said that if you were to take the statistics of the prophecies that spoke so much detail about Jesus' first coming, the odds of it not happening because it was so detailed would be like this. You take the state of Texas, you fill it 2 feet high with silver dollars, the entire state. You take one silver dollar, you color it red, you throw it somewhere in Texas. You take you blindfold you spin you around 3 times, you drop you somewhere in Texas, and the odds of it not being true is that first coin that you pick up being that red silver dollar. It is so detailed, okay? There's everything in the Old Testament concerning the first coming has been fulfilled. The ministry of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the resurrection, all of it's been fulfilled. There's so much Bible prophecy that's been fulfilled, which means that the parts that haven't been, to me, I'm already convinced that they're going to be because of what has been fulfilled. Okay? Now, we're going to see this stuff come to pass. And I think it's amazing to sit in our generation, because even from the 90s to where we are today, so much has transpired to make this stuff even more plausible. Because in the 90s, when I was in Bible college, we were having all these conversations like, how can there be a worldwide this and a worldwide that? Like, the world's a big place, you know? And it just, yeah, we have technology, but that seems a little unbelievable. But from the time I was in Bible college till now, I'm just blown at all of the worldwide stuff that has happened. So there's going to be a false Messiah, a false Christ, a false teacher that's going to come on the scene. And Jesus says, watch out lest you're deceived. That's what he said in all of the discourses for the first seal. That's going to happen. So, seemingly, after the rapture, things are going to look good. There's going to be a false peace, if you would. It's going to be like, oh, things are good. The Christians are out of here. We're good. You know, all the thorns in our, we're good. It's nice now. There's going to be a peace. But as time goes on, towards the middle of that 3.5-year period, it's not going to look so good. It's going to get really disastrous. Well, let's look at the second seal. Revelation 6, 3, and 4. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, come and see. Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth. So this tells me that the earth had peace from that first one, which is that 3.5 years of peace, okay? And that people should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword, okay? So the earth has peace because the Antichrist has risen up. He's brought a temporary peace, a false peace to the people of earth, okay? And after this false peace comes war. Now, historically, we know this is true as well, that after peace, there's war. This is common, okay? When we think of Hitler, and we think of the Nazis, okay, and we think of concentration camps, and we think of, what do we think of? Everything but peace, right? When you think of Hitler, you don't think of peace, right? But when Hitler came into power, he was advocating peace. And people bought into it. And there was a sense of peace. Now, Hitler did the same thing that the Antichrist will do. And there are certainly Christians from that time who thought Hitler was the Antichrist. And the problem, he wasn't. And the problem is, we have people even today who say, well, you know, Donald Trump is going to be the Antichrist, or blah, blah, blah. And here's the problem. In every generation, you can find someone that might fit that pattern. But the Bible's really clear. We're not going to know who it is until after the rapture of the church. And so for me, I won't name who I think is on the scene that could potentially fulfill that. Because one, once you say that that's the Antichrist, that person can't be redeemed. If you know, so you're not going to preach the gospel to them. Oh, that guy's the Antichrist. Then there's no hope for that Antichrist. And two, we don't know. And it makes us look like fools when it's not. Okay? But, with that said, I find it interesting what's happening in the political world today. Just want to say that. Okay? This political leader, whoever it's going to be, will find a way to make the Jews happy and the Muslims happy over the Temple Mount. This leader, whoever it's going to be, will find a way to bring back sacrificial, the sacrifices that were done in the Old Testament that the Jews want to do, the old sacrificial system. He's going to bring that back, okay? And everything's going to seemingly be good, and then it's going to fall apart. And after that, you're going to have this fiery red horse, which represents something, okay? Fiery red in the Bible represents blood. It represents war, okay? The white horse is a horse of peace. The rider of the white horse is a rider of peace. The second horse, the red horse, and the rider on that horse is a rider of war. He's going to bring war. And I want you to know this. God is going to do this. God is going to do this, okay? These judgments aren't just general judgments. They are from God, okay? Jesus is the one who opens the seals. Jesus cracks open the second seal, and the closest thing to God, think about that, the living creature, which is right around the throne, cries out and calls for a fiery red horse. It's a judgment of God. It says in Revelation 6, verse 17, for the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? That's how chapter 6 ends. The great day of God's wrath has come. Think about that. In Revelation chapter 6, the heavens are going to be rolled up like a scroll. This is just the beginning of birth pangs. The stars are going to fall. The throne of God will be seen by people on earth. And they're going to be terrified by it. Think about it. The heavens just open up and you see God on his throne. You're going to freak out if you're not a believer. It's scary. It's scary. In fact, when we get to it, we're going to see that they're going to try and hide their face from the throne of God and from the wrath of the Lamb, it says, okay? So we see this picture start to unfold that it's going to get really dark, okay? This is what the tribulation period is going to start to look like. It's going to start out with peace, and then war is going to break out. Peace will be taken from the earth, and people will begin to fight one another. Now, remember what Jesus said in Matthew 24, the second seal parallel. This is what Jesus said. Let me break this down so we can see this is the second seal. Matthew 24, 6 through 8 says, "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." The end being the Great Tribulation, okay? "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." Does that fit with the fiery red horse? Absolutely. The rider of the red horse is given a sword, and war happens. And somewhere towards the end of that 3.5-year period of time, everything's going to start falling apart, and war's going to break out throughout the whole world. Now realize that the judgments that are given in the book of Revelation are always worldwide. Always, okay? They're global. It's not just happening in Israel. It's worldwide. So the second seal is a seal of war, church. This third seal is found in verse 5. It says in Revelation 5, verses 5 and 6. "When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, 'Come and see.' So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine.'" I believe the parallel is Matthew 24, verses 7 and 8, which says this, "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places, and these are the beginning of sorrows." So this third horseman is a black horse, okay? And his rider is referring to famine. Famine. Now think about this logically. First there's peace, then there's war, and what comes after war? Famine. Because things have been destroyed by war. Okay? Famine comes across the globe, but this one is a judgment of God, and it's poured out on mankind, okay? The rider of the black horse represents this. Now notice what it says here. It says, he has a pair of scales in his hands. Can we just back up one really quick? So we'll just keep it here, and then we'll jump to the other one in a minute. He has a pair of scales in his hand. I want us to see this, okay? The scales are there to weigh something. Now when you think of a scale, don't think of the scales that we step on that are electronic. Think of Lady Justice. The scales that she's holding that have the 2 things that you have to balance the weights on. It's a scale of judgment, okay? So that's what they had in John's day, okay? They had a scale with 2 sides. Now, notice that it says in Revelation 6:6. Let's go 2 verses, there you go. "And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures." I want you to notice that it's not a voice from the 4 living creatures, okay? Because at this point in time, we've heard 3 of the living creatures speak. They've said, "Come and see." When the 4th horseman is revealed, the 4th living creature, okay? So who is speaking in the midst of the living creatures? It's probably God the Father. Okay? Now remember when we studied the 4 living creatures, according to Revelation 4 and according to the book of Ezekiel, the 4 living creatures are surrounding the throne and their wings are touching so that nothing can get in there except for what's already in there, okay? The throne of God. And there's one on each side, one on this side, this side, this side, and this side of the throne. One in front, one in back, one on the left, one on the right. Their wings are touching each other. They encircled the throne literally, okay? They're worshiping God. They're saying, "Holy, holy, holy," talking to God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, okay? Now, so God is in the center surrounded by the 4 living creatures. So from within these 4 living creatures comes a voice. And I just want to I'm just drawing this out a little bit, okay? It could be the voice of Christ, but I highly doubt it, okay? I believe this is the voice of the Father. Because realize where the judgment's coming from. Where's the judgment coming from? From the Father, from the throne room. Because what does the voice say? It says, and I heard a voice in the midst of the living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. So what is a denarius?
A day's wages.
It's a day's wage, okay? Now I want you to think about this. For those who pay rent, which is all of us, can you imagine your entire day's wage is just going to get you food for the day? How are you going to pay your bills? You got the electric bill, you got the water bill, you got the gas bill, if some of you, you've got and car insurance, you got medical bills, but you can't pay that if all your money is going for just enough food to get you through the day. Which means inflation is going to be an issue. Okay? That's a big problem. That one man's daily wage is enough to feed him for a day. Inflation's going to be insane. We have inflation now. Last I looked at one pizza place, one pizza was $35. That's now. Imagine if you have a family and you're working and all you can make is enough to feed you. Okay, so denarius is a day's wage. It says 3 quarts for barley for denarius. Again, it's a day's wage. Barley was something that the poor people would eat, and the wheat would be something that the rich would eat. It would be different. It's just a lesser quality wheat. It'd still be enough, but it's cheaper because it didn't have the nutrients that wheat had. Okay, now, so the guy with the family, he has to work really hard to survive because there's a famine. Now it's interesting because of the phrase here in Revelation 6:6 that says, and do not harm the oil and the wine. What does that mean? And before we answer that, I want you to know that God is dictating what kind of judgment. He's like, charge this for that and that, but don't do this and don't do that. God is dictating what these judgments are, okay? Do this and that. Don't touch this. Don't touch that. But what does the oil and wine mean here? Well, the oil and wine usually refer to the rich. Meaning this. We believe that there's going to be a worldwide famine, but it's not going to affect the rich. It's going to affect the poor, which is very common. In most civilizations, there's only an upper class and a lower class. There's no middle class. And so we believe that scripturally, that the gap with the middle class, at least here, is going to go farther and farther and farther until there's only lower class and upper class. The rich aren't going to be affected by the famine. The poor are. Okay? It's going to affect mainly the poor, which famines usually do. Now it's interesting, which means that what this means is that the rich are probably going to be fine during this first part of the tribulation period. They're going to have money because a rich person doesn't work. They don't earn a day's wage. They earn a lot of wages. They can buy a lot of food. It's not going to affect them, okay? They know how to take care of themselves. They're not working for a day's wage. They have a lot of money, okay? It's going to be a famine, a worldwide famine, but it's not going to affect everybody. That's what this is talking about. Not everybody in the world is going to be starving and dying. There are going to be a lot of people starving and dying from the famine and the war, but it won't affect the rich, okay? They're going to do just fine in this judgment. Now, but the situation that the world experiences, and these are just the precursors of what's to come. Okay? Now, note this. Jesus said, these are sorrows or birth pangs. Now, anybody know what a birth pang is? It's a contraction. Anybody know what a contraction is? It's before something big is about to happen, right? Before you get dilated to 10. When you're dilated to 2, and if you've been in your first pregnancy, I can't do this. Yeah, and the midwives will say, oh, girl, you're going to do a lot more than this. This may be bad, but it's going to get a lot worse. You're going to go through some major pain. And that's what's happening here, okay? It's going to get a lot worse. These are only signs of what's to come. Now, it's nothing compared to what's going to take place in the Great Tribulation, okay? But to the woman who's having those birth pains, it's enough. She's like, I can't do it. It's too much. But regardless of what you think, whether you can handle it or not, it's coming. There's no stopping it now. It's coming. The contractions before are nothing compared to what's to come. And if this second and third horseman is nothing compared to the Great Tribulation, then all I can say is, wow. Wow. See, I'm so thankful I'm born again, church, because some people tell me that, well, I don't really believe in God, but if this stuff happens like you say it's going to happen, then after the rapture, I'll submit to Jesus. I'll give my life to Jesus. And my thoughts are like, what? Are you kidding me? That's crazy talk. Do you know what's going to happen in that time? See, my prayer is that everybody would get saved before the rapture. My prayer is that people get saved at night. Honestly. You don't need to go through all this stuff that's coming. Why go through it? Now, trust me when I say this, okay? Everyone needs to fall on their face and surrender their lives to Jesus because he loves you and he wants to save you from what's to come. Okay? He's given us a glimpse now of what's coming, and I'm thankful for that. And he's given us an opportunity to be spared from all of that. So famine is in the third seal. The fourth seal, this is the scary one. Revelation 6, 7, and 8. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked and behold a pale horse. Now the Greek word here for pale is the word greenish yellow. It's a greenish yellow horse. It's the color of sickness. It's the color of death. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword. So this is the seal of war, okay? With hunger. The seal of famine. And obviously in the scripture says, and with death, and by the beasts of the earth. So the fourth horseman is going to bring death. Now, I don't know if you know this, but a fourth of the world's population has died. Do you know how many people are on the earth today? 7.9 billion. Which means that if this happens today, and the population is growing, not declining, okay? It's declining in Western cultures, but it's not declining on the earth. If there's 7.9 billion today, that means 1.9 billion people will be killed in this fourth seal. Almost 2 billion people dead on this fourth seal. Okay? 1/4 of humanity, this fourth horseman is going to bring to their end, death. 1/4 of the population is going to die. The world has never seen that many deaths at a time. Now think about that. We've seen 5.2 million deaths worldwide with COVID. That's what we've seen so far. And we've seen hospitals having to bring out refrigerator trucks because they can't handle it too much. That's 5.2 million. We're talking about 2 billion people dying. Okay? These are only labor pains of what's to come. And if the Lord tarries and we have 9 billion people or 10 billion people before he comes back, it's even more, okay? Think about all the dead bodies around the world and the diseases they will bring. Do you guys remember when Sri Lanka had that big tsunami and that earthquake? Okay, do you remember how many people died from that? 200,000 in one event. Okay? One of the greatest concerns that they had in Sri Lanka was what to do with all the bodies because of the disease. They didn't know what to do with it, and the disease was rampant. Okay? Think of COVID-19 and all the anti-vaxxers and all the anti-vaccinated. Think of the conflict that people are having between these two communities. Think about the conflict that's going to happen in a worldwide issue. Now, I want to show you because in the 90s we couldn't think of, pandemic, we can stop that. That's not really global. I took this picture today. This was online today. I want to pull this up. Okay? This is the infections from COVID in the last 14 days on this earth. All the blue circles. Now, the blue around the U.S. also counts for Alaska, just so you know, and Hawaii. And the blue for Canada counts for all of Canada, just like that. But I want you, this is the last 14 days. Do you think a pestilence, which means pandemic, can happen worldwide? I mean, we live in one. And 5 million people have died, and we're talking about almost 2 billion people are going to die from famine, pestilence, disease, war. Very, very plausible. This wasn't plausible in the 1990s. It's very plausible now. Okay? Very plausible. 2 billion deaths in the fourth seal. Now let me read this. Revelation 6, 7, 8. And when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, a green sickly horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the beasts of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, or a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. So things are only going to get worse. Now, interesting, most scholars believe that when it talks about the beasts of the earth here, that it's referring to an infestation of rats. An infestation of rats. And they say that because of all the death and the famine, it'd be roaches, flies, and rats. That there's going to be an infestation of it. Because there's no food for the animals, and so they're going to start feasting on the carcasses, which will cause more disease. Which cause a bigger problem. Okay? It's a horrible, horrible situation. Now, you want to talk about natural disasters and worldwide crisis? There was no crisis that we've seen outside of the pandemic, like Katrina. Do you remember Katrina? And all the problems we had with Katrina? You know, the tsunami in Sri Lanka is nothing. Katrina was really bad. COVID-19 is nothing compared to what's to come in the fourth seal, which is nothing compared to what's to come in the Great Tribulation. You know, I remember the relief efforts of Katrina because, you know, I was alive in that time and I was an adult in that time. Some of us were just kids in that time, but and I remember that America, one of the most organized nations on the planet, we completely dropped the ball when it came to the relief efforts of Katrina. We just didn't have the capability to help. Imagine a worldwide crisis. Worldwide. And I do sympathize with those in leadership positions in the government who have to deal with these things, because that's hard. It takes a lot of stress, you know. What do you do with a crisis like that? But what do you do when you have a crisis of 2 billion people dead? You know, I have some friends of mine who lived in Africa when the Ebola virus broke out. And I don't know if you know anything about the Ebola virus, but what happens is when you get that, and it literally, not literally, but it starts to melt the organs from within you. You know? And do you know how difficult it is to quarantine people in the bush? Try quarantining people in the States. We can't get it here. Imagine how hard it is when there's disease and all this stuff, and people just won't, you know, they won't quarantine or they won't any of that stuff, you know? It's really, really challenging. It's impossible. And again, in the late 90s, we were like, when we got to these passages, we struggled with it because we don't know how this is going to happen. But 21 years later, we can see how this can happen. Because it's happening. And these are just birth pains. There will be worldwide disasters, church. We're going to have some major problems on this planet. The world is going to be in absolute upheaval during this time. And these are labor pains. They are labor pains. So 1/4 of the world is killed with the sword, with hunger, with death, and the beasts of the earth. Do you remember what Jesus said in Matthew 24? In Matthew 24, verse 7 8, in the second part, he says this, "And there will be famines, pestilences," which is pandemics, "and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." So this goes with our Revelation 6, 7, and 8. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death. Now I want to pull this out, because this is the scary part. "And Hades followed with him." Okay? "And power was given to them," to Death and Hades, "over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beast of the earth." This scares me. Do you know why this scares me? Because Hades is following death. Now think about that. What does that mean? What's Hades? Hades, before the cross, was where the righteous and the unrighteous went. Hades, when Jesus died on the cross, when he was dead for those 3 days, he went down into Hades, which was called Abraham's bosom, which is where the righteous were. He preached the gospel to them, and he brought them up into heaven. So Hades is where the non-believers are going. It's the jail cell for the Great Judgment. Hades is following after death, which means that this 2 billion people are going to be those who aren't saved. Because Hades is following after him. Hades has got like this little basket, like a kangaroo with a pouch, and just capturing all of those who are dying. And they don't know the Lord. They're most likely not saved. They're non-believers. They will be cast away from God for all eternity. This is why I take the responsibility seriously that we have to share the gospel with people, church. We have a responsibility with this knowledge right here to get out of our comfort zones and to reach people. It is our obligation, church. And I understand that the cults have taken the book of Revelation and they've taken it to extremes. And they say, you can't understand the book of Revelation. But honestly, is what we've learned tonight really hard to interpret or hard to understand? Is it difficult to interpret? It's not.
To interpret, but it's not that difficult to understand.
Yeah. Is it really that mystical? It's not. It's not that mystical. Seems pretty clear to me. Yes, there's some imagery here. A pale horse that's the color of a dead man, whose name is death and he follows. Okay, there's some imagery there. But that's pretty clear to me too, that death and pestilence and war and famine and people aren't going to be saved and they're going to die. And they're going to be cast into Hades. 1/4 of the world is going to be killed. It's pretty clear to me that the first one, that there's going to be peace, and that peace is going to be taken away, and men are going to start killing each other in war, and God has given us a glimpse of what's going to happen. That's pretty clear to me. It's not very mystical. Now, in light of what's going to happen in the first 3.5 years of tribulation period, let's make this personal. How am I going to live my life? That's the question I want to leave us with tonight. How are we going to live our lives in light of that? What are we doing? And what is it that we would change or do differently in light of Revelation 6? These are just the first 4 seals. Okay? Do you really want to be found sleeping around with somebody, high, drunk, cussing up a storm, in the flesh? Because I want to hit all of us, including me, when the Lord comes back, or during the rapture? I don't. Do you really want to be not in your right mind because you're not sober when the Lord comes back in the rapture? Do you want to be engaged in sin when that last trumpet calls? I don't. I don't. See, I know for me, I can only speak for me, there's a lot that I could do differently. There's a lot I should do differently. Okay? And the first thing, getting away from the sin thing, as a Christian, is I shouldn't worry so much. I shouldn't have as much anxiety as I do. I should rejoice in the Lord more, knowing that He's going to save me from what's to come. I'm just being honest. I should be thankful more that this is not my home. That the struggles I'm having right now are not permanent. They're only temporary. And I can rejoice in my trials because this is not my home. Okay? Maybe your life is a mess. Mine's been. Maybe your spouse left. Mine did. I'm divorced, Maybe there's a loved one that you knew or know that died from COVID-19, from the pandemic that we're in today, that's a precursor to the precursor. Okay? Maybe you've had to intervene in some family drama in your life. Maybe you feel like everything's destroyed and you feel like you're just falling apart, okay? Can I just encourage you? Can I stir you up tonight to remember that Jesus Christ is coming again? He's coming for you, church. And if you're born again tonight, you can take a deep breath. You can relax. Because God has got you. And you can trust Him. And I know what you're going through is difficult. I know losing your voice sucks. I know insurances are horrible. I know cars breaking down is just, it's a problem. I understand that our health, it falling apart isn't good. I get it. Okay? But I want to encourage us, church, to get into that place of prayer and worship. Okay? Not because you're going to make God happy by doing so, but ultimately because you're going to find peace in the midst of your trial. How many of you are going through a trial right now? I am. How many of you have peace in that trial? This time I do. If you don't have peace in your trial, then come get peace in the trial. You know, I want to encourage us to get into God's presence. Okay? Get in the Word. Get on your faces before the Lord tonight. Let your heart and your mind be aligned with heaven tonight, okay? Paul said, we read this in Colossians, set your mind on things above, right? And not on the things of this earth. Where are your trials? On this earth. Where's your mindset? On my trial. That's on this earth. We need to step away from that for a moment and get our minds on things above, to think bigger than ourselves for a moment. You know, I was talking with Brent before service, and I said, you know, one of the things that I realize in our culture that is so dominant, even in the church with us, is we are so consumed with ourselves, me included, that we don't have, it just all of our conversations about our problems. And I get it, because I talk about my problems too. And most of our conversations aren't about the problem solver, God. We've got our minds on ourselves, and that's why we're struggling. And I want to just take a moment where we get our minds off of ourselves and place them on God. This is one of the benefits of Bible study, church. Just like tonight, you know, we came in, we had our Bibles in our hand, or we had our phones with our Bibles in it. You know, and we needed to meet with Jesus to have our minds refreshed, to have our hearts refreshed, to be refocused on the Lord, okay? This is why we do Afterglow, this is my prelude into Afterglow, okay? We're going to spend some time in worship. It is 8:38. We can spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's not hard to spend just a couple of songs in worship, okay? Spend some time in communion. Then you can take off, okay? Let your mind be refreshed. Focus on the Lord. And as you take communion, and Jenny, would you be willing to go ahead and light these candles now and the stuff as we talk about this? As you take communion, church, remember what Jesus has done for you, okay? The neat thing about communion and what Paul said, Jesus said, Paul declared this, is that you take the cup and this bread and it proclaims the Lord's death until he comes. So we're going to have this time, Lord, you're coming back, you know? That speaks to me. That communion is about taking the cup and remembering what he's done until he comes back for us. So when you take communion tonight, I want to encourage you, sit with the Lord. Talk to the Lord. Like, seriously talk to the Lord tonight, okay? It will do nothing for you, church, if you come up here and grab some bread and juice. That won't do anything. Can you go ahead and change the lights too? Okay? So as you take communion tonight, spend some time with the Lord, okay? You got to get past this tradition of communion and get into this spiritual connection where you connect with the Lord, okay? Now, there's got to be prayer from the heart. There's got to be some kind of conversation with God behind all of this stuff. So I really want to encourage you as we start to worship and as we get engaged in this time to get intimate with the Lord. You don't have to do it all night. You don't have to even do it for 20 minutes, but let's get one song or two songs where we're just alone with the Lord, okay? He loves you. He wants to have communion with you. He wants to engage with you. I'm just waiting for the music to play, okay? He's coming back for us. And so I invite you to draw near to Christ and let the Lord minister to your heart tonight. Realign yourself, refocus in light of our eschatology, in light of what's coming. Okay, so let's pray. Father, you are a good God. And Lord, I just pray that I want to say thank you, God, that though the world is challenging and dark, you have overcome the world. Father, I pray that you would just help us to get alone with you as we have communion, as we seek your face. Please speak to us. In Jesus' name, amen, church.